All right. Welcome to our third hangout talking about the Journalism 360 Challenge. With me, I'm Laura Hertzfeld. I'm director of the Journalism 360 Challenge with the Online News Association, the Knight Foundation, and Google News Lab. And with me today is Irene J. Liu right there. She is with the Google News Lab team. Right now she's in Seoul, but she's based in Singapore, right? Yes. Okay. She's like Irene worldwide. So, but she's representing sort of our Asia Pacific region on this call. And then we have Nina Zenni with the Knight Foundation next to me down there. So for those of you who are kind of new to the Journalism 360 Challenge and have read a little bit, but are kind of interested in learning more about it, this call is just to answer your questions, give you some of the answers to questions that we've been hearing so far about it, and give you a little bit of background. So like I said, it's a joint initiative between Google News Lab, Knight, and ONA. And our goal is really to answer questions that are facing the journalism world around immersive storytelling. And immersive storytelling for us includes VR, includes 360, includes AR. It's really a pretty broad definition of what is immersive storytelling. And in some ways, we're looking for the challenge ideas to like help us define that and where we can go from there. So the challenge runs through April 10th. Applications are open now. It's a really quick, short application form. If you have ideas, I encourage you to just like throw them out there and, just brainstorm a little bit, come up with ideas from your team to answer that question of how can we expand immersive storytelling? How can we answer some of the challenges that are facing the field right now? So applications are due on April 10th. It's been a very short sprint. We just launched March 8th at South by Southwest. So like I said, it's a pretty quick application for that reason. We just want as many ideas as possible to be coming in. And with that, after April 10th, we will evaluate applications. We will decide the winners sometime around the end of June and be sharing more information from there. But each grant can go up to $35,000. We have $250,000 available for these challenges. So we're really, really super excited to see what comes in. We're kind of looking forward to seeing anything and everything. So I will let the two ladies with me introduce themselves, and then we can go from there. Irene, you want to start us off? Tell us a little about what you do at Google.
Sure. My name is Irene Liu. Hello, everyone on the internets. I am the News Lab lead for APAC at Google. And so what we do is we work essentially with journalists all over the region to try to innovate and just up our game when it comes to storytelling and technology. So a big part of that, one of our focus areas is immersive storytelling. So how do we take these tools to tell stories in new ways? And what's exciting about Asia Pacific is that we use technology in the region actually quite differently than in the West, in the United States and in Europe. Mobile, a lot of countries are not only mobile first, but actually mobile only. There's just a lot of facility with technology. And of course, gaming is a huge industry out here, right? I mean, both on the consumer side as well as on the production side. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to really see how we can leverage all of those activities to really innovate in new ways. And so that's why I am really excited that we're able to do this in the Asia Pacific region time zone, and really to help promote, like I keep telling people when I talk about this grant program, it's like, we got to represent. There's a lot of stuff happening in this region, and it's time that Asia shows the world what we're doing. So I really hope that all of you out there can apply. And really think out of the box, and we want to hear new ideas. I think that especially in this region, not only are there stories that haven't been told in a kind of to an international audience, but there are ways that we can do this and how to leverage technology. So really encourage you all to apply and keep in touch with us.
Absolutely. Nina, you want to give us a little background about what's going on at Knight?
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, my name is Nina Zenni. I am the representative from Knight Foundation. We're really excited about being a part of this challenge because Knight Foundation was rooted in journalism, and we're really excited about this opportunity for journalists on the ground and technologists and people that are experimenting for the first time to really test out new ideas, to test assumptions that they have with things that they have been doing in the past, or new ideas that they really haven't had the opportunity to kind of play around with. And for us, it's really exciting. These kind of seed, prototype, early stage ideas are really exciting because we're able to kind of play around with new ideas, new ways of working. And a lot of people might feel a little bit intimidated at first because they might not feel like they have the equipment or the group or the collaborations, or they might not even be official journalists. But that's what's so great about this opportunity, is it's really open to anyone, anywhere in the world, with any sort of background. What we're really interested in is folks identifying problems that actual people are having on the ground, and focusing less on the content being developed and more about the ways in which they're looking to tell these stories in new ways. And really, taking advantage of this kind of early stage funding to kind of play around, like I said, and see what works, what doesn't, build out replicable solutions for problems that journalists and other folks are finding that they're experiencing. And in addition, join a network of really excited, innovative and energetic people on the ground looking to kind of experiment in this nascent industry.
Absolutely. And I think let's talk a little bit about that community aspect, because I think that's really the biggest piece of this. These grants are not huge. $35,000 is not enough to go and make some amazing, super flashy, full-length VR movie. We know that. It's more about creating a community around immersive storytelling and, being able to say, we have this group of people who, are interested in this technology, who have a story to tell, how can we get them together? And Irene, you know a little bit more than I do about sort of what's happening in that space in Asia. And if you can talk a little bit about sort of what you're seeing and the connections there, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think that it's quite interesting. We just had a networking event in Hong Kong, specifically focused on introducing Journalism 360 to the region. And it was incredible because we have a lot of practitioners, people who are the guy from iZuger, which is like the, one of the kind of key producers of hardware, right, in this space. They actually are a Hong Kong company. And so the founder was there with all his gear. We have people who are teaching VR and 360 production. So we actually have practitioners who are actually spreading the word already. And then also, there's a lot of interest in terms of commercial applications to this technology already existing, particularly in the area of property and also shopping. So more on the commercial side. And academia is also in this space as well. So I think that actually, if anything, it's, all the pieces are there. It's, in fact, journalism hasn't really quite caught up to the rest of the applications. And I think that that's really, but there is a lot of interest. And a lot of the questions that we get are related to sort of, okay, well, we want to do this. How we even have the equipment, but how? Right.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we're hoping is through this process, through this challenge, that conversation can kind of evolve and keep going, right? Because there's nothing like, removing the hypothetical and actually coming to do something in practice, right? So that's sort of where we are, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, that if folks are really interested in the tech piece of it, I think that's really perfect for this challenge, because like Nina was saying, one of the questions we keep getting is, oh, I have this story. Can I just, tell you what the story is that I want to go produce in wherever they want to produce it? And while we're very interested in story, I think we're more interested in it as a way to illustrate how to use the technology that you're coming up with. And, that there really needs to be sort of a technical part of this, a tech solution that's solving like a real storytelling problem. So that's really, our goal is to sort of find ways and find things that can be replicated as well. So, you know, it's useful for, maybe it's useful for a real estate or a shopping mogul, but then how do they translate that into something that's useful for news? I think is something interesting. And there've been a lot of questions coming up around that. So I think that's something we really need to clarify. And I think the other thing too, obviously we're doing a chat right now that's, you know, focused on Asia Pacific. This is a challenge that's open internationally, which is an unusual thing for Knight. A lot of their programs are focused domestically, and this one, because of Google's involvement and just the broadness of the topic, we're really excited that we're open to applications coming in from all over the world. So.
Yeah, and I think also on that note, just to kind of note for everyone too, because they are on the Asia Pacific time zone, that the applications themselves online will close at 11:59 Eastern time. So from now until then, you're welcome to start and kind of draft and then revisit and edit until you submit your application. But if you do miss that deadline of 11:59 Eastern time, you'll no longer be able to submit an idea. And I really like what Laura had said earlier about, you know, utilizing new technologies. And I think, you know, a good thing that we've been talking about a lot on these chats is really starting with the problem and looking for, you know, kind of new ways of communicating these stories and tying the format and kind of the narrative to the narrative in a more kind of provocative way. And so identifying the problem, focusing less on the content and more around ways that we can really underwrite lessons that can advance the industry as a whole. Something else to be cognizant of as well is the application is not super expansive. It's, you know, it seems like, you know, a collection of questions, but they each have word limits. And we ask primarily for people to remain as kind of concise and clear as they can in what they're trying to achieve, because we're really interested in this great opportunity for people who, you know, are frequently kind of running with stories and don't really have a lot of time to breathe and kind of experiment with new things, to test out things that they're excited about and haven't had the opportunity to kind of play around with.
Yeah, I think we should talk a little bit about the definition of an early stage idea, because I think there's a lot of confusion, at least a little bit maybe, on what an early stage idea is and what we're really looking for there. Nina, if you want to.
Sure. So early stage so we've worked with, and we've used kind of the term prototype in the past, which can really just be you starting out in the ideation phase. You've got this idea, maybe you've tested it out a few times, maybe you've chatted about it with a couple of colleagues before. And that's kind of, but you've never really had the, you know, the opportunity, the funding, or, you know, the resources to really kind of play around with it. And so this is really the greatest opportunity for that. You know, it might be something that you've been working on for years. It might be something that you've already kind of developed a little bit, but you're testing it out in a new way. So really it's, you know, that the parameters around what early stage means, you know, it's pretty flexible. It really depends on what the actual application intention is. And that being said, if you have kind of a couple of things that you're working on, you know, there is no limit to how many times you can apply to this challenge. We just ask that it not be the exact same application every time. So, you know, if you're kind of testing out with new things and you've got this kind of in the fire and this in the fire, you know, and you kind of want to see what can spark the interest of the people that are going to be evaluating the applications, you're more than welcome to apply as many times as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. Irene, what have you kind of seen in your travels of things that folks are asking for, or maybe some projects that you think might be a good fit?
I think that there's a lot of excitement around how you apply gaming engines and gamification into journalism. What's interesting about it is that some of the energy is actually coming from people who are on the gaming side. And so I think, and this actually goes to one of the questions I had for both of you, not that I should be the one who's asking questions, but you know, if someone has an idea, but they don't, so for example, if they're on the gaming side, they have an idea of a technology application, but they maybe don't have a story, or someone on the story side who is like, I have a great story, I would love to see it done in a certain way, but I don't have the technical chops to do that. How can they apply with that idea? And then will there be some kind of matchmaking service, or, you know, can they then, you know, do they have to have the whole team kind of put together already into when they're applying? I guess that's the main question.
Yeah, I can start, but Nina, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, again, this is why this is kind of early stage. I mean, there has to be a little bit of the ability for you to kind of actually do the project that you're intending to do. But that being said, the Journalism 360 community is incredibly robust. And, not that, we, and at Knight specifically, we've never kind of promoted ourselves as matchmakers per se, but, there is time during the actual grant itself that we leave open for people to identify partners and people that they would want to work with. And we've had in the past with different challenges, people actually meet other people that they've partnered with through the application process even. So, I would say, again, it really is kind of a case-by-case basis. We couldn't have someone who has, literally no experience and kind of no partners or anything. And there needs to be a validity and actually, the chance of them accomplishing what they're hoping to achieve. But it doesn't need to be 100% all planned out at the very beginning. This application phase is really an opportunity for people to play around with their ideas.
Yeah. And I would just add to that sort of J360 is a little bit twofold, where you have the first piece being the grant challenge, but the second piece is really creating this community of creators and the training program and education over the next year that's going to come along with that. And so I think naturally there are going to be a lot of collaborations that happen from this. So even if it's unclear initially and you just have this idea and you want to throw it out there, I think whether or not you win the grant, there's probably an opportunity to be paired up with somebody in this community pretty quickly. I mean, I think that's our real goal, is to sort of be able to find people with like-minded interests and trying to figure out how to get this stuff done. So I think that sort of makes this a little bit different from other challenges that Knight's done in the past. And I think it's a really cool opportunity, regardless of, the grant piece is great, but I think the education and sort of like growing technology training piece is also really exciting. So I would not discourage people, if they're like, oh, maybe I don't have something specific for the grant, but it's like, still stay in touch with us, because I think there's a lot of opportunities to, get stuff done. So let's see, what else have we talked about recently? We talked a little, I'm kind of curious on the technology side, because we've talked a little bit, we've gotten questions about, does this have to be made for a particular type of headset? And I think that I'm interested to hear like what people are building on in Asia and, what interest you're hearing on that side of things.
So I think that a lot of, at least from the journalistic side, a lot are building on for cardboard. Mm-hmm. So, and there's a lot of 360, it's less VR at this point, like true VR. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason is simply that it's an accessibility issue. And I think that I was recently at a conference where they were weighing this thing. So like, do you build so that as many people as possible can access it through cardboard or through the magic window, right? Or do you build a true VR experience, but that only works on, an HTC Vive, or whatever it is, right? So I think that's a question that people are really weighing, because certainly a lot of, one thing that is true about Asia is that people are very attached to their mobile phones. In some ways that's, kind of, they don't watch TV, they don't use desktop. Everything is done on mobile. And you see these big phones, right, that are massive. And that's really, so in some ways the magic window is quite useful, because the experience is much better on a much bigger phone or a much bigger tablet, right? Or phablet, I guess they say. And so that's kind of one of the main questions that we're getting. There is interest in cardboard, and kind of, so how can we get more cardboards out to people, to our readers, and those kinds of questions that they're weighing as well. The marquee, very, very intensive, high definition experiences, I haven't heard about too many people who are working in that space yet, just for the reason that, from an audience perspective, it's a lot less accessible.
Right. What are you kind of hearing as far as content area? I kind of think of like being in Hong Kong, and it's a lot of financial journalists in Singapore as well. Like, is there an interest in that content area for VR and immersive storytelling, or it's more sort of like general, just, you know, coverage in the area?
I think that I don't even know if the conversation has really gotten that far yet. But as you mentioned, there is a lot of financial journalism and among international news organizations in particular in Hong Kong and Singapore. You know, in Hong Kong, property is is kind of the biggest story in general, and it's what it's just top of mind for everyone because we live in tiny apartments, and so it's something that we always think about, right? And so I think that there's this question, and then one of the questions we often get is about, well, you know, we spend all this time, we produce one piece, how does that scale, and what, you know, if people watch it once and that's great, then, but you know, what does that mean moving forward, right? And so this question of sustainability, or are there ways to build storytelling techniques or systems that allow for repurposing so that you're not starting from zero at every single point. And I think that in some ways that question fits perfectly well with exactly this challenge grant, right? And so, you know, questions about, you know, infographics or, you know, things that, how can you tie data to this kind of work, right? So that potentially there are opportunities to not only use it once, but also repurpose it with the same data set, but newer, right? And that kind of thing. So those are all, I think, questions. The sustainability question is a big one.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's come up in other conversations as well, not just partially sustainability and then partially archiving this content as well. How do you go back to something that, you know, was made, you know, if we go back, you know, in 5 years, are we going to be able to experience this content in the same way? And, you know, if journalism is recording history, you know, we got to be able to get it back somehow. So I think all of those questions are things that we really want. I would love to see applications about this kind of stuff coming in. You know, those are the types of questions we're trying to answer. We have a question coming in on the chat from MP Gomatic. I was in a Best Buy store today, and it was amazing to see the consumer level 360 products on the shelves. Should we be looking at that level of camera? Yeah, absolutely. There have been some really interesting stuff made on the little Ryko Thetas, you know, on the little one that hooks onto your phone. I forget what it's called right now, the 360 one. I mean, I think, you know, our question is really about how do you expand the reach of this? And so I think that, you know, anything can be done on any of these machines. You can do something on a really high level thing that would be really interesting for this project, but you also can stitch something together on, you know, one of those Ryko Thetas. I think it's more about, sorry, the sun's going down, and so I'm like getting glary. There we go. You know, it's more about how do you illustrate the problem that you're trying to solve, and less about which specific piece of technology you're using. So that's what I would say to MP over here. Anybody else have any advice for him? Her? I don't know. But I
mean, one thing that I always when in having conversations about this question of how much should we invest tech-wise, you know, what I always say is that, like any other tool, it's a tool. You shouldn't start with the tool. You should start with the story. Yep. So and kind of think about it that way, because the truth is that by nature of it being 360, it's a very different storytelling medium, and you can't just apply your traditional, you know, video broadcast paradigm to 360. In the same way, you don't need, not everything, as you mentioned, has to be, you know, 4K amazing, you know, whatever. I mean, some stories don't require that, and quite frankly, some stories are better told in other mediums than in 360. So, you know, really part of it is just thinking more in terms of the story first, and then figuring out which tool can help you to tell that story. And so that, you know, that's less applicable, I think, than to this kind of challenge grant, because one of the things that we're trying to do is think about how you scale and innovate. But and it's more about the in some ways the technology and the application or the storytelling technique than a particular story that you're working on. But in general, the way that I would suggest people think about framing their proposal is, think of a use case, think of a story that you would want to tell, and then work backwards on the method and the technique and identify pain points that you think a resource like the grant could help to address, not only for your story, but also for other people who are working in this.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I also think, comfort of what you're working with also plays a role, thinking about how you can produce something quickly that, it really illustrates what you're trying to get across. And if you're picking up some new camera or a rig that you've never worked with before, and you're trying to, innovate and work on something in a very, this grant's a pretty short sprint. We're hoping to have some demos and prototypes by the end of the year. So that's not that much time. And if you also then have to learn a brand new technology on top of it, that's also challenging. So I'm not saying don't take on the challenge if it is what helps you, but I think if you're comfortable with a certain piece of equipment, then, use what works for you. We have a couple minutes left. Nina, is there anything else that we've seen come in that we haven't chatted about yet that you just kind of want to remind folks of?
Yeah, let me see kind of what some of the questions we've gotten in the past. Yeah, I mean, I think, well, something that came to mind earlier when Irene was chatting was it's really exciting, especially from Knight Foundation's point of view, to incorporate the international community because, as we've been saying, there are specific areas and opportunities in each region of the world where people are using these technologies differently. And it allows this community to become even more kind of built up because they're able to kind of test out these things in different scenarios that they wouldn't normally be able to kind of play around with. And I think that for us, that's really exciting. And so I'm hoping to really generate interest from around the world and testing things that, some people might think, well, is this really replicable or interesting in the US? Is this something that people are really, really interested in? Is this something they're working on? And I would still encourage people, even if it's specific to their region, to apply, because that's actually really interesting from our perspective. And in that regard, there is really no limit in terms of where you're doing the actual project. Something to keep in mind, it's important to kind of think about what it really is going to take cost-wise for this project. We don't want people kind of throwing up $35,000 as the amount for what they think it's really going to cost to make the project happen. Should you be selected as a semifinalist or finalist during the evaluation phase, we're going to be requesting some kind of more built-out budgets. So being cognizant of what it's really going to take to do the project in a realistic way is important, and keeping those things in mind. I think, we value the idea, we value the experimentation, but ultimately, like you said, by the end of the year, we are looking for people to have learned from their experience by then. Does that mean they need to have a finished product that's built out, et cetera? No, not necessarily, but I think, there's definitely some, there needs to be something that you build, and you have to have a little bit of an idea of what it's going to cost to do that.
Absolutely. Great. Irene, anything else you want to add in our last minute here, or should we wrap things up?
Oh, I mean, all I would say is, for those of you out there who are in the Asia Pacific region, I am here in the same time zone as all of you. So if there are questions, things that you would like answers on, I mean, certainly between the three of us, we will be able to help you to navigate through this process. Again, it's early stage ideas, really, don't be afraid to put things out there. I think that's maybe in some, for other competitions, you feel like you need to have a really fully fleshed out proposal, before you even think to apply. And I would say here, let's get those ideas out there and see what happens.
Great. We have one more quick question that we can just jam through real quick. And they're asking, if chosen, are we free to post pieces before the end of the year? And nobody's asked that because everybody's like, what? How much time do I have? So, yeah, I don't know. Nina, I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I mean, again, each individual grant is going to have its own agreement. So we do ultimately ask for the grantee to build out a proposed timeline of what it's, what they're planning to do in the first, second, third, et cetera month. So if you are planning on having something to test out and actually have ready before the end of the year, I mean, that's absolutely okay. If that means that you actually have a better idea of how long it's going to take, that's actually a great sign. But also, this is a new initiative, a new challenge, and whether or not the demo is, you're going to have even more to bring to the demo, then, it's very flexible. So I wouldn't worry too much at this stage in particular about those kind of granular items.
Great. Yes, exactly. Just get your ideas in there and then worry about it later.
Exactly.
It's all good. All right. Well, we are really excited to see the applications coming in from all over the world. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email is j360@journalists.org. And if you have specific questions for Nina or Irene, I can direct those there. And, have a great day and a great night, depending on where you are.
I'd also like to mention too, the Knight Foundation blog is a great resource as well for kind of tips and tricks, updates about timelines and things like that. So we will be posting a blog post next week that has some kind of tips and other information as well.
And there's an FAQ on the challenge page as well. So that answers a lot of the questions that we've talked about and other things that have come up as well. So feel free to check that out. And looking forward to seeing everything. So thank you guys. Thanks, Nina. Great. Thanks, Irene. Have a great night.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.